Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. So just a few things to note before we get cracking. Live streaming is currently up, but there is an exempt appendix. So if we want to discuss that, we'll have to go and stop live streaming and go into closed session for that. Where possible, if we could all have cameras on and mute when we're not talking, classic Zoom etiquette. I understand there are reasons why some of us can't have our camera on this evening, and that is totally understandable. If you want to speak for the ease of myself and Celeste, if you could use the raise hand function because it moves your little camera up. And yeah, just use if we've got access to the chat, just use it for admin Zoom issues rather than any questions, because those need to be directed through me. And also, if we have 5 lines of communication, it ends up being a bit messy. So do we have any apologies for tonight? I don't think we do.
Yes, we do. From Councillor Job, unfortunately, sent the last minute apologies.
Okay, that's fine. And then chair's announcements, of which I have none, apart from just to note that we've got sort of the additional meetings. This isn't the additional meeting in a few weeks' time, or is that something we still need to agree further down? Yes, that's in the work plan. So ignore me. We'll pick that up later. And we need to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which I apologise, I was unable to be at. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, I think it might just be for good governance, just to ask if there's any declarations for this evening.
Sorry, I'm very tired and I completely missed that section. So thank you. Yes, Asma.
Just on the declarations, I don't have any conflicts of interest, but it might just be good to note that I am a resident in a council property.
Thank you, Asma. Any others?
I'm also a resident in a council property. It's not a register of interest. It's raised for matter of transparency.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy. So let's go back to the minutes. Is everyone happy to approve those and as an accurate record, or does anyone have any amendments they'd like to flag first? Not seeing any amendments. Can I just have a show of real life hands or virtual hands to just see that we're happy with those? Fab. Thank you. Okay. And then I'm going to suggest that, as usual, we take items 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the next, followed by items 5 and 10, so that the officers don't have to sit here while we do our kind of scrutiny and meeting admin. Any objections? No, fab. Then I suggest we move on. So the first thing we've got is the furnished tenancy scheme. This is the item with the exempt appendix. So if you want to ask questions based on that, we'll need to turn the live stream up. So you can just flag if you want to do that. And it might be sensible to kind of group those together. Can I pass to welcoming Linda and the other officers? I understand it's Kieran and Carolyn and Richard and Nerys to answer questions tonight. So Linda, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll keep it brief and leave it to the officers to go through the report, introduce the report properly. But just to say, I'm really pleased that this is a scheme that we offer. It's increasingly important, as you'll see from the report. A quarter of our tenants take advantage of this scheme, and it's increasingly important as we're offering more tenancies, but also to people with without savings, on low incomes, perhaps coming through temporary accommodation or from supported housing. So yeah, it's something that I'm really pleased that we're able to offer. I know that some housing associations don't offer it, and that's a shame. And it's cost neutral to the council. Yeah, I look forward to hearing your comments on the report and hearing any questions or thoughts you have about it.
Thank you. I will pass. Oh dear, No, that's fine. I will pass over to, is it Kieran or Carolyn or Caroline want to lead on this one?
It's me to start, but it might be a bit of a double act tonight with me and Carolyn. So I will sort of go through the report, sort of summarize it for you, for everyone, and then if there's any questions, just feel free to ask at the end. So the main sort of purpose of the report is the authority need to seek authority to procure and delegation to award a contract to deliver the furnished tenancy scheme. So we need to basically go to, you have to bear with me, I'm really sorry about this, but my young son's just ran into the office as I'm trying to deliver the report. So I just need to get his mum. I'm really, really sorry about this. Bear with me a second.
Would you like me to try and carry on?
But okay, Carolyn.
Yeah, no,
I don't know
that's
how long
fine.
Kieran's going to be.
So, yeah, so we're seeking delegation to award a new contract because currently we exceeded the spend on the existing contract due basically to the demand of the scheme. The scheme's been running since 1998. It was originally an anti-poverty initiative over 26 years. And like Kieran and Councillor Smith said, it's got over 1,900 live furnished tenancies. So it's something that I'm incredibly proud of. So the benefits of the scheme, it basically enables our clients to move in and make their home into a home by offering them a lot of the essentials to sustain a tenancy, which is carpets, white goods, beds, anything really that they need to succeed in their tenancy. And it also helps reduce our void times and basically hopefully have happy tenants in our homes. And it will hopefully help relieve the financial strain it has on our clients when, you know, when they move, it's a stressful time. And if we can alleviate some of that burden by making their home or their new property into a home, generally we manage to turn that round in 11 days, depending on what they order. It's a small team in which we try and offer a hand-holding service to advise as much as we can on what would suit the client's needs. We also try to enable that the furniture has to last for an exceptional length of time for the duration of the agreement, which is a minimum of 5 years. So it's good quality furniture that we're seeking to seek a new contract for. I've kind of been taken on the hop. So
Kieran's back, Carolyn. So
back now. The childcare situation, I will apologise for that. I think Caroline did that was explained very well.
Started off.
No, so yeah, and I think just to come back to it, to summarise the report in terms of, you know, we need, in order to deliver this scheme, we need to fall within sort of the procurement regulations in terms of our sort of responsibility to getting value for money on the contract as well. So that's what we're asking for, to be able to deliver this scheme, which provides so many positive outcomes to residents. We need to be able to run a procurement exercise to award a new contract. Within the report, there's some things just worth mentioning around. Although this is to deliver the furnished tenancy scheme, there are other, for example, under the emergency furnishing section, we're looking to use this contract to also to deliver emergency furniture when required for sort of emergency housing or emergency decants as well. So it's not just about sort of the furnished tenancy scheme. It's also worth noting as well, they'll be providing that service, which is sort of a statutory service for the local authority. So yeah, in terms of the report in itself, that's sort of the summary. Unless you've got any questions or anything like that, or Richard, anything want to add any more?
In that case, I think we might jump to questions from us, if that's all right, and then we can move on to kind of any comments or recommendations. I've got a few, but I'll open up to other councillors first. So if you've got a question, could you raise your virtual hand for me, please? Sorry, I'm also just to add the sort of domestic distractions, I'm going to move rooms. So I'm just going to turn my camera off because my partner's cooking dinner and it's getting quite sizzly. And while I do that, Rosie, do you want to kick off?
Lovely, thanks. It's getting sizzly. Thank you so much for the paper. And yeah, a great scheme, and obviously like really, really important. One of the things I was struck by was the number of people that use this in Oxford, and I had read elsewhere that it's 2% of like social homes that have furnishings like on average across the UK, whereas it's 29% in private rental accommodation. Just wondered if they're we know what their proportions are in terms of private rental also in Oxford, and whether that has an impact on like how this affects demand. Just sort of reflections on how this differs in here in Oxford compared to elsewhere, I suppose, is what I'd be interested in. And then also, I just suppose perhaps a fairly simple question, but just wondered like to what extent we feel assured that this contract will will meet the demand given the increasing trend, and if we've allowed for flexibility, and if so, to what extent, basically. Thanks.
Given you've got a couple of questions, I'm going to suggest we get a response on that because I think, yeah, 2 or 3 questions at once, otherwise it's a bit much. So don't know if Kieran or Caroline or someone else you'd like to come back on that one.
Kieran, Caroline, on the kind of the uptake of the scheme and why it's in such high demand. Any reflections on that?
I can't really comment regarding the private rental sector because the scheme doesn't cater for that. But I've been doing the furnished tenancy, running the scheme since virtually it began. So it goes in peaks and troughs. So with the fuel crisis and economically what's going on in today's society, there's a higher demand across the board, but it's also more that they're taking it to the maximum of their orders. So there's definitely a surge at the moment because of COVID and the cost of living. Everyone is now heavily reliant on the furnished tenancy scheme. I'm probably going slightly off topic, but it's the difference with our scheme across, on a national basis. I've set this scheme up across the country or help other areas, and the difference is how they promote it. And the difference with Oxford is we give the tenants choice, and giving them that choice gives them a feeling of belonging and looking after their furniture, whereas other authorities might do it in packs or just do it for different kinds of services like women's refuge, domestic, when they're fleeing domestic violence in different settings. So because we're able to offer it into our social tenancies, that's probably why we've got a greater, 1 in every 4 tenancies being a furnished tenant, but that could be on different levels. It could just be carpets, it could just be white goods, or it could be everything that we offer to basically for people who've come off from street homeless and don't have anything, they can then move into their homes. So it's different degrees of the furniture that our clients have. But there's definitely a greater increase now in the demand of having full furnished tenancies, whereas pre-COVID, pre-2020, it was more just white goods or carpets and very few taking on the full furnished tenancy. Peaks and troughs, if I covered that.
You want me to come back on the second question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in regards to kind of the flexibility for future growth and anticipating if we're going to have it further growing, we have attempted to do that, and some of that details in the financial appendices. But certain, I think I can say in this forum that that's factoring both current levels of demand, factoring in that we've obviously got an ambitious new build program that will further cause demand to increase, while also kind of factoring in both for the first time that demand from the decant processes and our temporary accommodation stock. That's all been put into that mix with some recognition of inflation as well. So we have a level of confidence now that we're much better at anticipating that future demand, and the contract's been adjusted to kind of cope for that.
Has that kind of covered off your questions mostly, Rosie? Fab. Bill, did you want to come in on any of those?
Yeah, it was just to add that the with over 60% of our tenants now on one form of benefit or another, when the people are moving into their first home in many cases, without this help, this really popular scheme, a lot of people would go and find alternative ways to find furniture, including obviously credit, street lenders, and so on, which immediately puts people in danger of further financial poverty. So it's an incredibly important scheme. Because the furnished tenancy scheme, the furniture element as service charges are also covered by both the housing element of universal credit and housing benefit, it also means that those people don't actually have to, if they're on those benefits, they don't have to make the financial contributions themselves. So it's very much a win-win for tenants and for ourselves, even more so given that the scheme is cost neutral and pays for itself.
Thanks very much. Councillor Mundy.
Thank you very much. I think the questions I've got might need to be answered during closed session. So I think I'll choose to ask all of my questions during that, if that's okay, because I think I might be wrong, but I'd rather say that that's the case. So I don't know if you wanted me to ask them now, and then you can decide whether to go closed session.
Well, probably best if do the questions themselves refer to anything in the exempt appendices?
I'm not sure really. I mean, they are about data. Yeah. Some of them are about data. But I could. Shall I ask them, Chair?
Well, not if they're from the from the exempt financial appendix.
I'm not directly referring to anything in the exempt appendix. So I just think that there might be exempt information that I'm asking for.
Okay, that's fine. In which case, the officers could determine that, and then we can go into closed session. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, apologies. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. It's certainly welcome that we help our tenants in this way. So I did have just a few questions about it though, because obviously with the scheme potentially lasting for 5 years or longer, are there ever items that people are renting where there is potential for them to end up paying more for the item than it's actually worth? And in those instances or in any others, would it be legal in any instance for OCC to allow tenants to eventually own items that they've been renting, or is it a scheme that could never lead to that outcome for people? I was a little bit taken aback that we rent out carpets, because I thought, well, certainly any place I've ever lived has come with carpets. So I figured that council properties would generally come with carpets, but perhaps that's something that is quite normal in the circumstances for them not to come. But if you could just comment on whether we're finding that properties are being rented initially without any carpets, or if it's just the odd room. And then also, as obviously the items remain under the ownership of the council, are they repaired on demand, and does that include sort of white goods as well? And also, what costs does the council undertake in checking, removing, storing, and administering the furnishings that are being rented? Thanks.
I could attempt to answer.
Carolyn, you answer what you can, and then I'll come in.
I might not be doing it in the order that they were asked, but I can say so if I start with the carpets, all of our void properties per se will be let with no carpets. Our void teams will treat it as they will strip it bare and do the general maintenance. And when it comes to the allocation of that property, it is like an empty shell. So in very rare instances, if there is immaculate carpet in there, the tenant will take on that responsibility, and they can they'll be lucky to get those carpets. That's very rare. So the council does not let properties already carpeted. That's something they have to do as part of their furnished tenancy. In regards to yes, we have tenants that have been under the scheme for a considerable length of time. However, as it's part of the rental charge is set up, and we go out annually or try to get out annually to inspect and then repair or replace any items of furniture that need repair, but that we have to maintain. So in order to do that, we will, due to other tenancies ending, we have a storage facility where we recycle and reuse existing furniture that we have. We also have a rolling stock of new replacement items that as and when, mainly I'm talking about white goods, if they break down, we can get out to those tenants and replace ad hoc. So sorry, if you can go back to for the length of the tenancy, most of the tenants, we have tenants that have been there for a number of years, but we have different options that they can go under at the 5-year point. So we may, they may not be paying or renting the items after the 5 years, but we still have an obligation to maintain them, and we stop the rental charge. So we have lots of our clients that actually, after the 5-year point, aren't being charged for those items, but we still go out and check it's safe and maintain it. As and when those items are past fair wear and tear, we will remove them from the property and it will be for the tenant to replace. We do have instances where we have clients still paying for the items, and it could be for many reasons why they're still under the scheme, but we would ex gratia gift the carpets at the 5-year point, because we don't want to be, it's not a forever scheme. But we will maintain, and if we have to replace, we do have some clients that have replacement items, and in all honesty, some of our clients, it might be it costing us more to keep them in their living circumstances than others. It's a self-supporting scheme. We've got more vulnerable clients that sometimes need more help and assistance, and we would maintain those appliances and make sure that they have a bed to sleep in and etc. So it swings and roundabouts, really. We try and maintain all 1,900 tenancies the best we can. I know I've missed a couple of the points.
Don't worry, Caroline, I can probably fill those gaps. Thank you. Just trying to fill in the ones that haven't been answered. So in terms of the kind of the on costs, the costs in addition to the actual furniture, so that is covered in Appendix 1. We try to break down in that first paragraph about what the actual cost of the scheme is versus what the furniture cost is. So basically what's left is the staffing costs, renting any storage, that kind of thing, the travel costs, etc. In terms of carpets, and do we offer them as standard, and why don't we offer them in standard? For good or for bad, that is normally the kind of the standard in the industry. Most lets are done without a carpet. That's what most RRPs operating in the county and the city would operate, and this is why we do the furnished tenancy scheme, to give people an affordable option to ensure that they do have a carpet, because anyone can imagine, moving into a new place, that the cost of having to carpet would be astronomical. So having this in there to support people with no upfront cost is really important and a key kind of anti-poverty measure of the scheme. And then finally, in regards to the charge itself, that is set based on the cost. So that whatever we're having to purchase in and the cost of the goods, that then gets translated into then what the service charge is that's charged to people. So they shouldn't be paying any more than what they're taking out on the scheme based on those costs. So hopefully between me and Carolyn, we've covered those points.
Happy with those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions from other councillors, I might ask a couple of questions now, although Councillor Mundy and Councillor Rule have asked some of mine, so I'm going to sort of scribble some off. I think one of my questions is about, Oh, actually, I had one question that occurred to me during that discussion, which is, and it's probably in the report somewhere, but I got a little bit lost. Quick answer. What happens if, like, so if they swap tenancies, can they bring that furniture with them?
I'll answer that. So if our client moved from a council property into another council property, yes, we would transfer their rental charge, but we would remove the carpets. Carpets and curtains are bespokely made for set properties, and I wouldn't want them ripping them up and taking them with them. So they would get left behind, and they can take all of the transferable goods with them, and it would just get 2p'd across. If they move to a housing association or out of the Oxford area, no, they can't take those items with them. There have been instances if we have, as an authority, in effect paid for them, and if they say they've been a tenant or client of ours for in excess of 4+ years, if they were moving out of area or housing association, we have no, we wouldn't recycle, put it this way, a bed, because that's their bed. We can't let anyone reuse that. So yes, I would ex gratia gift that to them. It wouldn't cost them, the debt wouldn't follow them. The rental charge, not debt, sorry. So, but if they move from council to council, yes, we can transfer their rental charge. If they moved outside the city, no. And that's how we then start recycling our furniture, putting it back in. And then when we're going out doing our annual visits, we can start recuperating and those furniture items.
But what would happen if, yeah, so if they'd been living in the council house for a shorter period of time and they had one of these contracts and then they moved on for whatever reason, what would happen then?
It would just end. That's an onset of they wouldn't be saddled with you're tied into a 5-year agreement. It would just end. The main aim for us is to keep them happy in their home for a long length of time. So, yeah.
Councillor Mundy, did you have a follow-up point on one of those?
I just had one more question, Chair.
Go for it.
Is it, can the council, I'm just asking this as can, not should, can the council consider, on the basis that the scheme is increasingly popular, and if there was to be a potential strain on the cost neutral side to it, is it possible for the council to consider subsidising the scheme from the HRA?
Bill?
I was going to say it's probably better for me to answer. I mean, the scheme is an HRA scheme that is fully funded. So all the staff and so on who operate the furnished tenancy scheme are paid for by the HRA, as well as the cost of purchasing. So it's fully funded by HRA. The recouping the outlay comes through the service charges, which is where the cost neutral bit comes in.
Sorry, can I just follow up on that? Sorry, Chair. So what I'm asking though is it possible? Can the council consider no longer having it as a cost neutral exercise, but potentially seeing it as obviously a great benefit to the most needy of the council tenants, and therefore something that was worthy of not being cost neutral, but actually being a cost drain on the HRA?
With the other pressures that we would have within the housing revenue account, I think having a cost neutral scheme is probably the best way we can do it. There is what's called a multiplier, so we can actually adjust it up or down, but cost neutral is where we really want to go. Otherwise, it will be just taking funds away from other service areas.
And it's worth pointing out that because it's eligible under housing benefit and universal credit, that's, for the 60 or something % of people who are on benefits under the scheme might be higher. That's additional money then coming into the HRA from central government via housing benefit. So this would all need to be weighed up.
So if this Oh, so if this is because this is attached to rent, it can be paid for using housing benefit. Oh. I guess kind of on the opposite flip side, and okay, I'm not an economist by any means, but given that, so my understanding of the scheme, you may just say, no, you're just wrong and you've misunderstood it, is that you buy some furniture, you give them the furniture, great. They pay back an agreed amount of money that includes staff time in the original outlay. But, and maybe this is just negligible because that's how things work. But what happens with like, is there any mitigation for inflation? Or does that not matter?
Well, the service charges are revised regularly. So as inflation drives up the cost of furniture, we will adjust the service charge as appropriate, which will then, if someone's claiming housing benefit or universal credit, that would be updated then and potentially increase their benefit entitlement. That's how we currently cater for inflationary pressure. Obviously,
Okay, so I see. So it's like the service charge isn't kind of like a set, it's a set amount, but that amount can kind of change as per the agreement. Yes. Okay. Thank you. And then my other question is, so obviously some of the furniture gets recycled and put in storage and used for, if it's good again, might be used later in the scheme or for emergency decants and things. What happens? Does then do the carpets and the furniture that's deemed not good enough just go in the bin?
So I can try and answer this. So yeah, we would predominantly try and, as I say, recycle, even if some of the items, if they come back in immaculate condition, there's nothing to say we can't offer them into new tenants coming in. Mainly I'm talking wooden furniture, wardrobes. We have donated in the past to projects around the city. We haven't done that recently, but there's nothing to say we can't support outside organisations. We ultimately, it only ends up in the recycling if it is of no use. So we have quite a large storage capacity, and it's basically monitoring that. It's difficult in the fact that sometimes it might come across as it's wasteful if you're clearing a property, but when you're, how can I say, carrying out an inventory on a property, sometimes the state of that property, it is only good for disposal. So there is quite a high amount that gets cleared in void properties, but we do, that's all I can say, we really do try to donate, and there's a lot of places that take it. We also donate to Emmaus occasionally, so there are projects that we know are out there, but it's good to know that we can actually reuse it within our own housing stock, both temporary and the HRA side. So it generally gets reused. Probably didn't answer that very well.
Don't worry. I mean, I'm just trying to read. So not, but kind of, does that suggest that there might be kind of a little bit more capacity or a bit more space to think creatively about what gets done with the, furniture that's either kind of, and I appreciate there might be some places where it just needs to go, but if there's kind of space to kind of work with, outside organizations and maybe think a little bit more.
We could, but the demand is within our own housing stock at the moment. So
okay, so you don't basically you've done it in the past, but you're not at the moment because you don't really need to.
Yeah.
Caroline,
yeah,
my understanding of the scheme is that we reuse items that we can until the point when they become unusable. So they're not just unusable for tenants, but charities may not be able to use them either. But I think, you know, if there is any kind of any ability to drive down waste at all, that I'm happy for us to take that away and look into what are the opportunities to have a more kind of established relationship with charities, etc. So that if there is any opportunity to give reuse things, that we look into that.
yeah, I just think, and because I think there are some, you know, we also look, it's really great. We look after our tenants really well and probably have fairly high standards about what we give them. And then it would just be, I know things, you know, we don't want to be giving things that are really horrible, but at the same time, there are people that we can't support who might have no furniture, no bed, who might not be so fussed about the fact that someone else has slept in it.
As I say, historically, we have maybe just on supply, if we get, say, 5 voids that come back and they're furnished tenanted properties and the furniture is of a good standard, if we don't have that storage capacity, historically, we would donate, as I said, to Emmaus, or I've actually forgotten the name of another organisation, but we would be donating to those. But as I say, at the moment, the demand's not there.
Yeah, demand's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. And so when you're talking about emergency decants and the role of this scheme there, would that be a situation where you might use kind of existing furniture or older furniture, or the furniture is likely to be reused? Because
That's
it's got
exactly it.
time.
That's exact. Sorry, I'll come in. I'll find my internet's working, so I'll speak. So that's exactly it. So that's what our preference would be, because obviously with emergency housing, we don't, you know, the residents, it's not their long-term housing. It's really just an emergency provision, and it stops us obviously spending on getting emergency furniture elsewhere to be able to bring it much quicker. So yeah, absolutely. That would be the main protocol, to reuse it for that purpose. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that's all of my questions on this one. Does anyone have any other questions or any comments? Follow up? No? Any recommendations out of that? Rosie, yeah.
Well, you mentioned the one about establishing like relationships with organizations and around wastage, Richard. So maybe that would be nice to have formalized. That sounds great though. And thanks for the questions, answers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm now kind of getting it, but we can have recommendations on this. Yes, we can, because it's coming. Yeah, so I think actually that would probably be a good recommendation to have, because it'd be quite interesting to see what the capacity is, and if there are kind of, because I know separately there's a lot of work going on kind of voids and void times at the moment, so it might end up dovetailing. So if we could have that as a recommendation, and I suggest maybe Celeste tries to get that done as best she can, and we can confirm the wording by email. Fab. So thank you very much. And oh, we need to agree that recommendation. Can I just have a show of hands that everyone's happy with it? Fab. Anyone not happy with it? No, I think they're just unable to. So, oh, and no one's got any restricted. No. So, thank you to Kieran and Carolyn. Thank you very much for fielding all of our questions. Please feel free to go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. You're welcome to stay, but I imagine you've got other things to be getting on with. Okay, so we're moving on to the implementation of refugee resettlement in Oxford. So can I pass to Linda, but feel free then to pass on to others. So welcoming Alan and Richard for this one.
Yeah, so I just say, I mean, this is obviously a really important area of work for the council. That, you know, all councillors, you know, want to see us playing our part and doing well in this area. I mean, the report really provides an overview. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion that arises from it. The panel might be interested to know that we're being formally assessed for City of Sanctuary status at the end of this month. And so, I hope all the work in this area, which is covered in this report, will set us in good stead for success in that. And yeah, so the report focuses on all the work that's happened, but obviously it's ongoing. And there's a report to Cabinet just next week on Local Authority Housing Fund 3, and we've been granted funds to purchase further 5 properties, including, I think it's 3 for Afghan refugee families. So yeah, looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Fab. Anything further from Alan or Richard, or should we kick off with some questions?
I can give you a brief resume if that would be helpful, but just the report if you as well. Do you like me to do that, or I'm quite happy
Yeah,
to
maybe
take...
just a brief introduction, but it's a very lucid report, so.
Okay. Yeah, so there's just an update to brief to inform the panel of the progress of the refugee resettlement programme in Oxford. As identified in the report, building upon previous success of the Council's refugee resettlement programme, the Cabinet approved in 2023 the corporate commitment to resettle at least 8 families per year through the government grant and resettlement schemes, with the caveat that suitable, sustainable properties can be secured. This new phase 3, commenced early 2024. Despite the challenging local housing market to date, we have secured 8 properties, with the 7th family due to arrive tomorrow after a delay with their flight from Lebanon. And we have just confirmed a family match for the 8th property, therefore meeting our target for this first year of phase 3. The properties procured in 2024 are a mix of 4 social tenancies through the local authority housing fund and 4 from the private sector. The planning work has started on procuring further 8 properties for 2025. These will also be a mix of 3, as Councillor Linda's already advised, from the Local Authority Housing Fund, and a minimum of 5 private rented sector properties, one of which we've already secured for the start of next year. In June 2025, a review of phase 3 will be completed to check on progress and assess viability to decide whether to continue beyond January 2026. The resettlement programme continues to be financially self-sufficient, with all council staffing required to make the scheme a success paid for from the grant. Resettlement grant funding has also enabled the council to work in partnership to support other projects which provide supplementary services for refugee families, for example, the School Advocacy Project, the Health Access Project, and the Refugee Employment Support Programme. And finally, this funding is also, and the resettlement work has also contributed to the council's effort to seek accreditation status as an authority of sanctuary. So hence we'd just like you to consider this update and note this report. Thank you. And take any questions if anyone's got any.
I've got a few. Does anyone else have any they'd like to start with? Yes, Councillor Rule, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the paper again. Generally amazing work to see, and thank you so much. And it's like for all the work that's been going on this, because it's great. And congratulations on meeting the targets. I just was wondering about I suppose the point at which people leave the scheme, and the note in the paper about how people have access to the same services as others would. And I just wondered what kind of a slight concern for what kind of specialised support those people might need at that time, even like regarding negotiating rent and tenancy renewals, and would love to hear your thoughts on that, and also like what communication I suppose there has been with those people about their process of leaving the scheme, if that's okay. And then just a very short question was just an interest in whether the criteria for the review has been decided yet, or whether that might be shared. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, so we have a dedicated support we have an intense support for the first 12 months. Asylum Welcome can provide that support, and from the onset, the families who engage with that support provision will be advised of their expectations of how the programme works. And depending on each family, how they progress, they are assessed by the end of the 12 months to decide whether they need further support. And obviously that support will be bespoke around what their needs are to try and match their support there. We also have, as a backup, a light touch service that we offer from the council. So as soon as they finish the 2 years of up to 2 years support with Asylum Welcome, we can also support those individuals whilst they're in the resettlement programs with signposting, seeking advice, etc., with local advice agencies and what have you. All in the efforts to prepare families towards when they become towards the end of that program cycle. For the Afghan families, it's for 3 years, and for the UKRS families, it's for 5 years. So it's all a lot of concentrated effort now. We've remodeled this whole program of support from the lessons learnt that we had with our initial phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Much more bespoke work is happening around the families to try and get them on board and get them more independent way before the program ends for them. Yes, there are those families who have more complex needs, and where we help them is then linking them in with mainstream provision across offered in the city to ensure they have that continued support if needed. Hope that answers.
Thank you. That kind of covers off one of my questions. I guess so to clarify my understanding of what means, they're going to be quite basic questions about how the schemes work. So my understanding is, so you often, or not always, but it's either through social housing or it's through the PRS. So you kind of procure a house that they stay in, but the rent is paid for them out of the scheme. Am I?
Okay, so if I can just what we normally do to secure the properties, okay, so if they're coming through the private rented sector, what normally happens, we secure the properties first. We pay a holding fee. This is all grant funding, so there's no burden on the local residents. So we will secure those properties. We paid 2 months rent in advance, and we will help set up those properties with furnishings, etc. The difference with the private sector is that, well, in fact, when families arrive, so let me just go back. So when families arrive, they will be supported to access universal credit. And that universal credit will then be using the housing element to cover their rent. Where those families still have a shortfall because they're benefit capped, then this is when the grant funding is used to top up that difference. If they have a discretionary housing payment that they wish to claim to support them because they've, with the benefit caps, etc., then again, the grant funding will be used to step up and fill that gap until such a point that those individuals have been able to secure either employment or benefits which exclude them from the benefit cap, and so enables them to be able to afford those rents on their own. Obviously, with this, we've been very fortunate with the local authority housing fund, where we've been able to secure 4 properties so far. Then the rents are much less, but again, still the same process. The families will still be assisted to apply for universal credit in the initial stages. And then, as I say, we're working and supporting with them to help them into employment to become more financially independent for the longer term.
So as they exit the scheme and when you say kind of renewing tenancy, that would mean that they stay in that same property, but they are then sort of out of the scheme, but they're still living in that property.
Yeah, so if they're a social tenant, they will, once they've finished the program, then they can use that property, the social housing. If they're a social tenant, then they continue like any other social tenant to remain in that property until they no longer want to use it. The local authority housing fund properties can then come back to the council to be used to house others if we wish. For the private renter, we've had real success here with private rented schemes. We've been able to negotiate with landlords to keep it as close to LHA levels, and we've got about 19 families from our original cohort who are still within the properties over 5 years. So the long-term sustainability for a lot of these families has been quite successful. And they don't want to move. You can imagine once they've had the trauma of moving from one country to another, the last thing they want to do is to move. So what we ensure is that we support the landlord and the tenants to build that relationship between themselves. And to say it's proved quite a success. We've had landlords coming back to us when tenants have decided to move on for whatever reason, and they've offered the properties back to us. And again, we recycle those properties because we've been able to support the landlords and the tenants throughout the process.
Brilliant. Thanks. So with the LAHF stuff, would that then mean that is that like a new sorry, some of these questions might seem really stupid to those of you who work on this every day. My apologies. But would that then be like would that be through a housing association? Would that be like a new council house that's been sort of bought as part of the scheme?
Yes, so the bonus with the local authority housing fund allows us as a council to replenish our stock or to add to our stock. Okay, so it comes back into our housing stock to use. So should a refugee family decide to move out of the area, the council retains that property and can be used for other residents as it so wishes.
And just to add to what Alan's already said, those tenants will become secure tenants then. So that's a lifetime tenancy, and it's only when they give that tenancy up that we would then choose how we reuse that.
But it's still kind of something that, that it seems like a bit of a win-win-win situation all round. So yeah, Edward, did you want to come in?
Hello. Yeah, I really welcome this. Really glad to see how we've been able to support people there, and also the references to our really valuable refugee and asylum seeker charities, Refugee Resource and Asylum Welcome. So that's really brilliant. So I note that under the scheme, we'd need to resettle a minimum of 8 families a year. Is there a maximum number of families that we can resettle under the scheme? And if so, what is it?
No, not really. It's the most viable, as I say, is 8 families with a minimum of 29 individuals. That's what we've worked on our calculations before with making it a viable scheme for us. But there's no maximum. As long as we can secure properties that are sustainable, then yes, it's a win-win for the scheme as well, because the longevity of it means that we continue to get that money coming in to support these families.
I think I vaguely remember having quite a lengthy discussion about that about 2 or 3 years ago, actually. And I guess I've got one final question, which is, again, I did some very basic maths. My maths A level was a long time ago, but it seems a lot of and I think I vaguely anecdotally remember us having a discussion about this as well a few years ago. It seems that some of the average family size is, well, not larger, but they're sort of potentially larger properties for some of them. Is that and have there been difficulties kind of finding family-sized homes? Because I note that the average family size is like above 4, which is, about the same as the UK, but finding family homes can be a bit on the trickier side, or is that just not true?
We have got a mix this time. We've got a 2-bed, 3, 4, and a 5-bed from the private sector, and we've got a 4-bed in the social housing and 3 2-beds. So it really does depend what property does become available for us through the private rented sector. And what normally happens is that we will go back to the Home Office and say, we've got this size property, and please can we find a match to that property. Now, ordinarily, most of the larger families are Afghan families. We have been able to, and very lucky to secure a 5-bed property with 11 individuals in that property, which has just been amazing that we've been able to secure that in Oxford at LHA levels as well. So it's really depends on what becomes available at the time. But obviously, yes, we would be pushing to try and get larger properties to ensure that it's viable for us to continue. And so that's why we would need to review in June to see how we're progressing, to make sure that we are on target, to make sure that we can make those figures stack up, sort of thing.
Thank you. I just had a question that occurred to me off the back of that. Yes, actually, it was about, because it sounds like you're building up these really positive relationships with landlords, and generally it seems like as a result you're kind of using them again for this scheme. Is there any kind of cross-departmental working to ensure that those relationships with landlords, say, you've got a really good relationship with the landlord, you can't use the property for this scheme, that's then kind of passed on to the homelessness prevention team or something?
Yes, we work very closely with the private rented procurement team. So what we've done is we've actually set up a matrix of what schemes are on offer. And so the resettlement scheme is listed under one of those schemes, along with the home choice, all of the schemes that are on offer. Sorry, I can't remember all of them offhand. So we work very closely. So if we find that there is a property which may not be suitable for our needs, or the timing of it, or for whatever reason, we will pass that over, and vice versa. So we are not wasting this much needed asset for us in the city, because we do have to find properties within the city only. We cannot go beyond the city boundary to ensure we fulfill our commitments.
Thank you, that's really helpful, and thanks again for the report. It was really great and really brilliant to see all of that work. I don't think I've got any comments or recommendations, but I don't know if other councillors on the call do. No. In which case, I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next item. So I'd like to really thank Alan for coming along and answering all of our questions. And yeah, so, and again, you are welcome to stay, but you are under no obligation to. And then I think we'll move on to housing performance. Thank you. Housing performance monitoring, which is the 24-25 mid-year monitoring. So I'll pass to Councillor Smith, Tom Porter and Richard Wood for this one. Feel free to divvy up the introduction amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I'll just leave it to officers to introduce this one, if that's okay, Chair.
And I think the report probably speaks for itself. So I'm happy me and Tom can take any questions, but I definitely need to introduce it.
Thank you very much. Any questions from other councillors on the call first before I get started? Not seeing any. I really stupidly, when I read the report, was I just didn't quite get to the taking notes stage. So I'm having to remind myself as I go through of the things that I came up with earlier. But I remember there was. Oh, yes. I wondered if you could, so I know we've spoken a lot about voids in previous meetings, but I didn't quite, and I accept that this is the case, but I didn't understand the explanation of why it's going down when the numbers seem to be saying the opposite. And I appreciate you're saying it's the case, I'm sure it is the case, but yes. Could someone explain that to me, please?
Yeah, if I can come in on that one, Chair. Yes, along with the voids which have came into be managed since April, since we made the changes, there's also voids which were already void before then, which had already accumulated large void periods. So while the new voids are coming through and they're coming down, we've halved the relet times, we've still got some existing or pre-existing voids which are coming through and making the overall average much higher than it is for the new ones. And that will continue to be the case probably until the end of the year, when we've got rid of all the new ones. That's one of the things where you've got so many being affected by a high average. When you make a change, it's like a drop in the ocean. So it will be gradual. Once we get to the next financial year reset, the averages should be much lower, and we expect them to be much lower than the 45-46 days average relet times that we're seeing for the new voids currently. So a lot of progress has been made. We do have the legacy voids to get through the system. I mentioned previously the many changes. I won't go over those again. The many changes to the process, but yeah, it's one of those things where we've just got so many already from last year, which already had high void periods, void days that are impacting those figures.
And so, as well as kind of the new processes and that affecting kind of current lets, I guess is there also ongoing? Because I know, I mean, anecdotally in my ward, I know there are some voids which just are sort of mega long. So is there also kind of, so is it that twin approach of trying to cut down those ones that are really just almost the outliers, as well as trying to cut down generally?
Yeah, there's two different areas. There's voids, which are relatively straightforward, but there's quite a lot of those were affected by the previous processes, but also major voids where there may be significant challenges. We've got one 2-bedroom flat in Jericho, happens to be in Jericho, which is we've been quoted £200,000 to get it back to a lettable standard because of various issues with the actual original construction, asbestos and so on. So those really are waiting and for a decision, but that's about 20% of our annual void budget. And we run through over 300-400 voids a year, you can see the impact of doing work on those. So there are some long-standing voids where decisions are awaited, and some members will recall that a couple of years ago we actually disposed of 5 properties which were no longer economical to repair, and I think the overall cost for those was about 1.3 million that would have cost us to repair them. Again, that's over our entire year's void budget. So there are some long-standing voids in various wards for good reason, where decisions need to be made. In terms of those that can and will be relet, the numbers of outstanding voids are shrinking, and they are working through those with ODS prioritising those. And as I mentioned in previous meetings, there have been competing priorities within ODS, which seem to have been resolved. And moving forward, as I say, I'm hoping to get the figures much lower than the 45-46 that we're showing now come the new financial year.
Oh yeah, you've answered my next question, which was obviously 45 is a great improvement, but our target's 25. So yeah, it will be good. And I wonder a bit about timescales, but yeah, new financial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously temporary accommodation, I think we're gonna it's just an ongoing challenge. But it's what I was encouraged by was the sort of slight increase in prevention duty outcomes secured.
Yeah, so in a very challenging picture of homelessness, the ongoing huge demand and high placement rates, temporary accommodation that we've discussed at previous meetings. On the prevention side, it's very positive in a very difficult picture. We have invested in our prevention services over the last 6 months in that attempt to try to respond to rising homelessness and TA pressures. And the two key prevention measures that we report on are the balance between prevention versus relief duties. So are we taking the duty while someone is still in their current accommodation and aren't evicted, versus are we taking it once they are homeless? And we are successfully managing to do the majority in the prevention stage. MHCLG, when they visit us quarterly, that's the key measure that they look at with local authorities, and we're doing very well on that at the moment. So we just need to keep that up and do the most work as possible in the prevention side. But then also we set a very ambitious target around outcomes on prevention, 60% positive, and we are actually currently hitting that at the moment. I do think it's going to be very difficult in the current market to keep it there, but obviously it's a stretching target which we want to have. And I think what also sets us apart compared to some of our local authorities is some of the local authorities do well in this area in different housing markets because they just basically move everyone before they become homeless. But we're having a good mixture of moves before they become homeless and actually doing good work in the current accommodation to sustain it. So working with landlords and that kind of thing to actually turn things around and keep people in their homes and minimize that disruption and then cost to the local authority. So that's a real success story here. Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. What do you know roughly what the split is between kind of prevention duties where you're seeing people being able to sustain their current tenancies versus?
We have that data. I don't have it to hand, but I'm happy to write back and share that.
Yeah, that would be really interesting just to see kind of what that split is.
Yeah, because that's part of our HCLIC submissions to central government. So I'll have that to hand. I'll be able to do that tomorrow.
And because presumably in terms of pressures on our homelessness and housing and temporary accommodation, sustaining current tenancies is also better for it, kind of feeds into that.
Yeah, totally. And it's things like interventions, like we have a landlord mediation service, so an officer that is specialised in mediating with landlords, trying to resolve disputes. We have an officer who will work with a tenant, an officer with the landlord to kind of bridge that gap, and that's been very successful. We're doing good work at the moment in supported accommodation. Previously and historically, too much homelessness has come from evictions from supported accommodation onto the street. And working with our RPs, we have meetings to kind of oversee that work and pre-eviction protocols that providers have to comply with to avoid that whenever possible. And we're doing some good work at the moment with the antisocial behaviour team and using the kind of those powers that they have around the different ones that they have available to make sure that people can stay in their current accommodation rather than face homelessness. So it's a very kind of multifaceted kind of toolbox that we have around prevention, but in the current context, we are using absolutely everything we can to try to keep people in their accommodation.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really, really positive and interesting to see kind of what that split is. When you say mediation service, does that mean like if the relationship's broken down, or also about kind of repaying arrears, or all of them above?
All of the above. Obviously, a lot of those cases they come to us and there's nothing the mediator can do. It's broken down. The landlord's determined to take whatever action, and that's what happens. But there are disputes, behaviours, pets. Often it is around arrears. So the landlord may be in a position of saying they've got several £1,000s arrears, they've got to leave. It might be that we mediate and say, look, maybe we'll pay off half of it from the local authority side, and then the payment plan will come in for the rest. And the landlord might say, okay, then they can stay. And it's that kind of proactive, flexible approach, because very small, modest interventions there can save us putting someone in temporary accommodation for months, and in a hotel maybe, and all the impacts of that. So it's very effective, and it's really important work.
Brilliant, thank you. No, that does seem better for everyone and for existing pressures. But Councillor Mundy.
Thank you. Yeah, so obviously it looks like there's definitely learning that's been happening with regard to complaints and to the ombudsman's investigations. What I wanted to know really,
is that for this report or for the next report?
I thought we were talking about the complaint handling performance. Am I wrong?
No, we're doing the KPIs at the moment. That's the
Sorry.
next one. Don't worry.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Sorry about
I was just a bit
that.
like, God, is there a bit of this that I've missed? But no, that's the
Yeah, no,
next
no problem.
report.
That's fine. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I'll call on you first next time. Don't know why I'm muting myself. In which case, did anyone else have any other questions? Not seeing any. I don't think there are any recommendations arising out of that. I'm not going to recommend that you send me that stuff because I trust you will. In which case, I'm just checking my running order to double check who I say goodbye to at this point. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you to Tom and Richard for attending, and feel free to enjoy the rest of your evenings. And now we are going to move on to housing complaint handling performance. Bill, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Yeah, unless Councillor Smith wants to first,
Oh.
but I'm quite happy to if she wants to defer to me.
You go first, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was only 3 weeks ago that we were here with the annual report from last year, so much of the kind of topic of discussion will be quite similar. There are some key things to note, and hopefully you've all had the chance to read the report. We are following our previous customer care and complaint officer leaving at the start of this financial year, and then the new member of staff not starting until September. We are in a backlog situation with our complaints, which is being managed, and we are expecting to have that closed and be completely up to date with those within the next 6 to 7 weeks, so certainly by the end of this year. It's worth noting that compared to this time last year, complaints have doubled, which is quite significant, with a whole variety of reasons that we expect that to be caused by not only our own publicity campaign to promote complaints, but also the Housing Ombudsman, which is obviously publishes a whole raft of every single complaint that investigates and finds fault with, it makes sure it's publicised, national press and so on. So there's very much an increased awareness of complaining and the benefits of complaining. At the moment, we've got just in October, which is obviously not covered by this, we've got 24 new cases, stage 1 cases and 2 stage 2, so the numbers continue to rise. Damp and mould is quite a common theme with the stage 2 cases. In terms of the Ombudsman activity, I mentioned before, they've significantly increased their workforce, and the activity into the number of investigations that they've been carrying out, even with ourselves, is increased in Q2, with 5 being looked at. The maladministration case, which is noted in here, is the same case which had the complaint handling failure order last year. Nothing else has happened. It's just the next phase of the Ombudsman's journey. So it's a complaint that just doesn't stop giving in terms of us. So it's appeared in both the annual report and here. And as mentioned in the last panel, we're going to be providing improved theme-based analysis on complaints being made, and also we'll be publishing our case studies. So all these various cases are coming through from the Ombudsman, but also our own cases which haven't gone anywhere near the Ombudsman. We will be publishing, as well as there being a corporate revamp of the complaints website pages, given that the rest of the council will be on the same journey to a single code of complaint handling, probably from April. I think that's probably my kind of intro, unless Councillor Smith wants to add anything.
No, just to say, talking about complaints is never going to be a good news story, but as we said at the last panel meeting, it's really important that this information's put out there in order for transparency and accountability, and most important, that we consider it properly ourselves as well and learn from it. It's a shame Catherine Mays isn't here this evening, because I did want to say, what a great job she's been doing, and the responses to complaints that I've seen where I've been copied in, because the complaints, involved me in the first place. People copying me into their complaint. I think tenants now are getting a really thorough, detailed response. It is really, really good to see people getting that level of response back. So yeah, I just wanted to thank her for her work and say I'm really impressed with how she's doing.
Thanks both. That's really good to hear. I'm going to jump straight across to Councillor Mundy now to ask his questions.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry for jumping the gun there. Yeah, so obviously, yeah, you talked about sort of learning from it, so that's definitely very welcome. And obviously, in relation to the increasing number of complaints, Bill, I think you referred to sort of increasing awareness really of the process. That's obviously going to be something that residents across the country would sort of be aware of and have access to. So really what I'd want to know is whether we're seeing these kind of changes in the numbers of complaints and the involvement of the Ombudsman in our neighbouring districts and other districts similar to our own. And if so, sort of if there's some kind of league table of where we're standing. I seem to recall at some point seeing us not doing that well, and I just wonder where we are at the moment in relation to others.
Yeah, we're just about to have the first set of tenant satisfaction measures published by the regulator, where we'll be able to compare ourselves with other local authority landlords. Certainly, the mid-year from last year reports were showing that satisfaction with complaints with local authorities was very, very low. Around the median percentage was around 34%, with ourselves sitting in that 33-34%. We are not alone, though, in complaint satisfaction completely nosediving. It has done across the whole sector over the past year or so. A lot of that, I suspect, will be due to things like damp and mould, where we've obviously done a big publicity drive to get people to report damp and mould, and obviously the outcomes there are it can take much longer than people want. We have got coming up, we think next month, is the launch of Our Web's Law, which will have a big impact on how we handle damp and mould and across the sector. And again, we think there'll be continue to be high levels of complaints across the sector until we've really got out to the other end and services everywhere are completely transformed in dealing with those issues. I think our own areas of weakness very much remain with communication and making sure that the tenant is kept up to date, as well as getting things fixed first. I mean, very much it's in the repairs and property maintenance arena. That's the big areas.
Thank you.
I guess so you get these complaints, some of them are upheld. I mean, obviously a large chunk of the stage 2 complaints are in the property services area, but I guess that makes sense that they're there rather than in terms of, the parks department, for example. But with a stage 2, is there a sense of kind of thinking of looking at why that happens, and then also looking at the kind of a process of kind of like lessons learned from the complaints that are upheld?
Yeah, yes, there is. I mean, obviously, these wouldn't relate to parks because it's purely the council's housing landlord function. But in terms of lessons learned, that is part of the. That's right. That is part of the requirements from the Ombudsman, which is why we're going to have the case studies published, and even from the as the Ombudsman actually sends through determinations and stuff, we have mop-up sessions. We've actually got one next week with officers from myself, Neris, property, and ODS and CAT to go over all the different issues to try and understand where there are issues that could have been handled better, and try and make sure that they're closed down. And it's one of the things that we really want to focus on once we've got rid of the backlog situation, because to get that learning out and to cover it off, to make sure that as best as possible it isn't repeated.
Thanks. That's and do you find that, so in terms of, so you talked about the damp and mold problem, but are you finding that that's having an impact on the complaints that are coming in, or you say communications and area development? Is that something that you're seeing kind of changes in nature of the complaints that are coming in as a result of that, of work you're doing on that, or not so much yet?
Well, we're just coming into the damp and mold season, to be fair. So even though we've got some now, this is not the height of it. There will be more coming in through the course of the winter and the spring. And as I say, the changes that are coming in imminently will hopefully make the whole sector much better in responding to tenants' needs in terms of dealing with damp and mold quickly and efficiently and on a permanent basis.
Yeah, and the point about communication as well.
Yeah, it's one of the key areas. I mean, we've got better communication in some areas, particularly with some areas of ODS activity. Obviously, I've mentioned many times now the text messaging service reminding people. We're also tenants can also now, if they've registered, we are live with our tenant portal. We're just waiting for sufficient numbers of people being registered and using it to report and track their own repairs. Although we're kind of drip feeding the numbers through rather than doing a big bang of publicity, because we want to see the actual repairs in action. Since we launched, we've only one person's reported a repair so far who's registered. We want to see more than that come through. But within the portal, people can actually track their own repairs, see what's outstanding, and very much that communication with tenants is going to be a big piece. There's further work that that is a requirement of the regulator to keep tenants informed of progress with repairs, and that's one of our key areas of development as well.
Thanks very much. That helps to kind of clarify that. And are there any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. In which case, I think I'll say thank you very much. I appreciate I also wasn't here for the discussion that you had about the year report and the annual report. So I apologise if I'm going over the same ground as you did last time. And I would like to thank Councillor Smith, Bill Graves, and Nerys for coming along this evening, and you may now go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. I think we're now going to move on to the work plan. Part of that involves the additional meeting on the 27th November, because otherwise we were going to have a 5-hour-long meeting this evening, because there are some really chunky items that we need to discuss next on the 27th of November. So does anyone have any amendments to the work plan? Is everyone happy with the work plan? Happy? All those in favour? And so we'll see you again on the 27th of November. And yes, we have a special meeting on the 27th of November, at which I will see you on, and then obviously future meetings as well, which I don't know off the top of my head, apologies. So with that, thank you very much, and see you on the 27th of November.
Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Celeste.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Celeste. Great.
Thanks. Bye.